Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Mike DOLCE Show, battle-tested edition. And we have my good friends, Dr. Andy Galpin and Joe DeFranco on. If you are here watching us on YouTube or listening on iTunes and Spotify, Google Play, you definitely know who these two gentlemen are. Two of the pioneers in the sport, two of the most accredited, experienced, and respected coaches in all of sports. And I'm just super happy to have you guys on and chit chat with you today. So how you fellas doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us again.
Yeah, I was trying to tweet out here the info on where this thing is live. So I wasn't like, checking ESPN or anything. I'm like, trying to put more people in this thing. But
you were checking TMZ, weren't you?
Oh, good luck. Good luck getting on that. I am so bad with pop culture. It's just.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably a good thing these days. I certainly try and avoid it anymore because there's no benefit to being up to date with what's going on in pop culture, right?
Zero, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, unless, of course, let's just jump right in. We can talk about a pop culture topic. I want to get you guys to weigh. Now, two of the top coaches in the world, I am positive you have done this before. This is an innovative style of training I'm extremely curious about to see what you guys think. I think we have been trumped in our cumulative careers here, putting all of our time and energy and work and training camps together. I think none of us have trained in this style, and I think we might have missed the boat. So what do you guys think about this right here? None other than Joshua Fabia, quote, training Diego Nightmare Sanchez.
What am I watching?
Bro, that's Diego hanging upside down, defenseless, his coach Josh Fabia punching him, slapping him, and soon to be kicking him as if Diego is a heavy bag.
I'm speechless, right? I had not seen this, so I'm freaking speechless right now.
Kicks.
Unfortunately, I'm very much aware of this. Every line of communication I own was filled with comments and questions about this, and I have nothing productive or quality to say about any of this, other than the fact that I hope this episode is over now.
I'm gonna just stop this. I love looking at Joe's face, actually watching in disbelief as what we've seen. So this guy Josh Fabia, I don't know anything about him really.
You know enough.
Know enough. We all know enough. It's the typical.
That's it. That's enough right
story,
there.
Right? True Hollywood story. He steps into Diego's life. He takes over Diego's career. He becomes a guru to Diego, and Diego's hanging upside down like a heavy bag, getting punched and kicked in the face by a guy who weighs 120 some odd pounds. Right. So what's going on here is crazy. Go ahead, Joe.
The one thing I am up to date on, though. Have they parted ways recently?
Evidently they have. That's what I've read so far. I mean, I'm white knuckling my keyboard, waiting to hear more as this comes out. Just breathing this in. It's incredible, mind melting, horrible content that's in the world, but it is in our world, unfortunately, and it does cast a bit of a shadow, I think, on us and on the industry as a whole. What do you think, Andy?
I think you just need to ignore and get this fucking thing out of the light as fast as possible.
Fair enough.
You just move it on through. Don't let these folks have any ounce of attention. There's clearly some. I don't know how to say this without getting sued, but there's mental health issues somewhere involved in that at some or mental faculties, however you want to say it. I don't care, but I don't want that a part of. Like especially you, Mike, like you come from when this sport of MMA in general was, let's put a moat around the cage and let's put alligators, and it's worked so hard for so many decades to make this equivalent to being an actual professional sport with real professionals. And I just don't want to go backwards at all. And that's just, all this stuff does is like, it's TMZ stuff. It's grab attention. Like we don't need people like this. And, the best way is to just ignore and let's shine the light back on the folks who are being professional athletes, the folks that are running charities and the folks that are doing just all the other stuff that there is to promote the sport, and with the professionalism that most of the athletes have, what they do with their day and how they do treat it like, an NFL player would, or whatever other category of sport you like. So that's the best way. Just ignore. I don't like all of you guys. I'm sure I've gotten 1,000. Hey, what do you like? I don't even respond. I'm just like, I'm out. Like, I don't want them to get a minute of attention past what they've already had. So, and it's a shame with Diego too, regardless of the situation. It's just a shame when any person, human, athlete or not, has to go through something like this, where there's just, again, clearly some tough things going on behind the scenes, one way or the other, however you want to slice it. So that's unfortunate, but from the sport perspective, it's like, well, what can we do to go up? Let's go up, and let's shine the light on the folks who are. If you're struggling with mental health, cool. Like, let's talk about that. Let's get resources out there, whatever. But if it's the opposite, let's show the professionals.
Yeah, I agree. And let's do exactly that. Let's move off of that insanity to kick off the show, and let's shine the light on the great athletes. And what I wanted to get from you two is your MMA Mount Rushmore. I don't think we can ever say who is the number one best. There's great athletes in their division, in their time. I like to blend it a little bit more and say, who's the Mount Rushmore of MMA in your opinion? And this is all speculative, right? This is all our opinions here. So Andy, you go first, then Joe, then I will hit cleanup on this one.
Okay, so actually, I do this kind of like how I do hip hop whenever I get these questions.
Uh-oh.
Because I don't feel like you can say something like music is so personal preference based, right? There's no way you can say A is better than B, right? There's no way. So I like to categorize it, and they're like, okay, you can make an argument of, say, who are the top 5 lyricists, and you can make an argument of like, who are the top 5 innovators. You can make an argument for who are the top 5 and just in terms of style or whatever, like uniqueness. And then it's like, oh, okay, now I can compare Rakim and KRS-One to a Tupac, right? Because prior to that, like, without putting them in categories, that's not a fair comparison, because now you're just picking, do you like style more than charisma, or the opposite? And that's not the same thing. So I think with MMA, I like to do the same thing. Like, do you want to talk about most talented, or do you want to talk about have the actual best numbers, right? Because those are very different. And one example to highlight this is, take a BJ Penn. Like, BJ Penn's record, I don't even know what it is, but it's like, let's call it like 6-12 or 16-12. Like, on no planet would he even be, like, if you just put that guy's resume up numbers, he would look like not even UFC level guy. But when you look at and you talk to anybody who knows anything about actual stuff, you're like, wow, like the talent on that guy, what he could do. Yeah, 6, look at that. Now, I know you got the like 8 straight losses or something in the career.
Yeah.
But he wasn't washed for all those. Certainly the first 3 or 4, right? I mean, you look at like the Rory fight, he's fighting a guy massively bigger than him in his prime. So he's a good example of someone who's like, he's not on that Mount Rushmore for me, but there's a reason he's called the prodigy. Like, when you talk about, when you hear Randy Couture back in the day saying like, I couldn't hold this guy down. And you're like, geez, okay. Like, I couldn't, there was just so much talent there, but you couldn't say he had the best career because he's 16-14. I mean, that's a horrific record when you compare it. I actually think a sneaky one that people don't respect enough, and then I'll stop and I'll let you guys move on, is Dan Henderson.
Oh, yeah.
So look at Dan's record. I don't know what it is. It looks kind of similar to Randy's, but Randy is another example, 19-11, right? 32-15. How could this guy be the best ever when you've got, guys out there like that are 20-2 or whatever? Well, you can't find someone who has a better resume of wins and losses. I mean, just look at the names. You're scrolling, and like, you're scrolling, and all you're seeing are legendary fighters, all the way back to his last 25 fights were against Hall of Famers. Yeah. Or something absurd. And then his previous 10 were also against Hall of Famers. Like, there's just no fluff there. I mean, his third fight ever, Alan Goes. 4th fight, Carlos Newman. Like, you're already talking about guys that are legendary in the sport. Gilbert Ibel, a heavyweight, right? Yep. Nogueira, Hanat, Babalu, like Henzo. It's just, and because of that, like, he is literally a guy who's like 185, sure. 205, yeah, heavyweight, cool. Back to 85, whatever. Like, just didn't care. So if that guy stays and fights and protects his record at 185, he probably is 30-2.
Yep.
Right. But he didn't, because he went up to heavyweight continuously. So to me, I think he should be on that Mount Rushmore, just because he epitomizes both high level wins. No one who has fought 40 guys at the same caliber that Dan has, as well as the true spirit of I will fight anywhere, anytime, up and down. That doesn't really matter. So he is on my Mount Rushmore of guys that, again, not that necessarily the best fighter, best record ever, but someone who's like, this is your top 4 ever. So and I could fill out the rest. Like John Jones is the obvious one that, like, it can't be left off your list, right? Until that guy actually loses a fight.
Yep.
But the counter to him would be, well, I mean, technically Dan Harrison's fought at a higher weight category than John has, like 7 times.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. And John Jones has 15 fights at heavyweight. Is he still undefeated? Maybe not.
Fair point. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know, like take all those losses away from Dan that he fought on 3 weeks' notice against a heavyweight, like a ranked heavyweight, as a dude who's walking around sub 200. I mean, I don't remember what you walked around at, but I don't know if you know, but he couldn't have been much more than 200 pounds.
I used to train with Dan back in the early Team Quest days. He was walking in the 180s drinking beer.
Yeah.
And I've never known Dan to ever be fat for whatever reason. I mean, dude trains like a freak also, but at the same time, he was not diet compliant, as we say. So he easily could have made welterweight. And I forget what he was making back when he was training, at the Olympic level, right? I forget what those years were. But Dan, knowing, he could have made 170 scratch, no problem throughout his career. But like you say, he was fighting at that light heavy and even heavyweight, which is insanity.
Yeah. So those are my entries to start the conversation, and I'll let Joe take it from there.
Who you got, Joe? Mount Rushmore, MMA.
For me, I would say, and again, I realize it could all be argued, but just me personally, what got me into it and trying to kind of take everything into consideration, guys that were actually dominant, but also who got me into the sport, was the first one that pops into my head is UFC 1, watching Royce Gracie dismantle everyone. That's like, as soon as you say Mount Rushmore, for me, that's number 1, because I remember just watching in amazement while this dude that had like no physique, didn't look like much, just dismantle people, tie him into a knot, choke him out. It was, like just insane. So that kind of caught my attention, and I'll never forget watching that and just being in awe. So he would be number 1. Then I kind of got away from, it went away. UFC and mixed martial arts went away for a little while. And then the guy who kind of got me back into it and was dominant for a period of time is Chuck Liddell. I look at him as almost like, Hulk Hogan in wrestling terms. Like they'll say, that's maybe.
Good. That's good. Yeah.
He's not the greatest worker. Like he doesn't have the greatest matches. Like some might say, like, from a well-rounded standpoint, you could say there were better fighters out there, but the look, the dominance, the excitement for a Chuck Liddell fight, like he's what got me back into watching UFC and MMA, and now I haven't stopped since. So he would be my number 2. Then GSP, I loved, not only because he's just an amazing fighter and seems like a great dude, but I just always loved his approach, where, turning his weaknesses into strengths, kind of changing and evolving each and every fight. Every time someone would say, this guy's got the answer, GSP would, he was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, so to speak. So that would be my number 3. And then I think you got to put John Jones as number 4, as like the current guy. Again, when in that sport, not have been being beat is just insane. I guess Khabib, you could make that argument too, but I'll go with John Jones for my 4th one.
Yeah, and I think we overlap here, John Jones. So for me, I have John Jones. I think John Jones is the greatest fighter of our time. based upon his resume, you go down John Jones. I mean, let's just briefly run down John Jones's resume here. Let's start kind of in the earlier days as he's coming up through. He comes into Andre Guzmão, was, pretty good. Gracie guy, Stephan Bonner, Jake O'Brien, Matt Hamill, then Brandon Vera, Modeshenko, Bader, who's got the strike for the Bellator title, Shogun, Quentin Jackson. This is where he starts to go on his tear of beating UFC world champions. Mauricio Hua, Quentin Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, probably the greatest fighter of all time, Chael P. Sonnen. We have Gustafsson in the mix. Glover, who's still fighting as a contender. Daniel Cormier. Jones B. I'm going to take up the whole show talking about Jones. It's hard for me to say anything against Jones, and then people talk about outside the octagon. We don't care about that. We're going to take Floyd Mayweather off the list if we're talking about outside. We'll take Bernard Hopkins off the list. He was a convicted felon, right? Boom. If we're talking moral code here, we're wiping away 93% of all athletes even, right? So John Jones, George St. Pierre. I think George St. Pierre could be better than John on my ranking, but George didn't have the same caliber of competition active when George was active. Not George's fault. John, George, and I'm also going to say Fedor Emelianenko. Fedor actually had that very similar heavyweight who's who of, and I don't know if I can find it. I'm not going to waste too much time digging around here. Fedor had that who's who of the heavyweight list. Krokop and the Guerra brothers. He destroyed everyone back at a time when MMA was, slinging and running and gunning. Over in Pride, where that was a whole nother world. And then the number 4. Now that was the top 3. Those top 3 are neck and neck. They have the Demetrius Johnson's quality of competition. Hard to say. He took some losses. All right, hard to say. Khabib, I think Khabib potentially could be there. He didn't have that lineage. He didn't have that title long enough to put him there. I think he's amazing. Undefeated. Who knows? We'll never know. But I will have to say Chael P. Sonnen. I will put Chael P. Sonnen on my Mount Rushmore of MMA, kind of for reasons, Galpin, that you brought up. Chael brought something different. Chael fought everyone. Chael fought middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight, right? Chael fought everyone, and Chael beat guys that maybe he shouldn't have beat, but he lost to guys that he never should have lost to. Now, I personally trained with Chael since 2004. I will tell you this, doors closed, inside the training room, Chael Sonnen beat the shit out of Dan, Randy, Matt, I don't want to, Tim Sylvia, BJ, like anyone who stood in front of Chael in the training room. Chael made it look like a video game. And I don't say this because I'm his buddy or I'm just, throwing some satire here. I saw Chael fucking destroy dudes. I've never seen Chael as good in the octagon as I've seen him in the gym. So I'll put it, but what he's done for the sport on the microphone, on the marketing side, without Chael Sonnen, there is no Conor McGregor. For sure, Chael created the entryway for Conor to be accepted and have the type of energy and success that he's had. And Conor's, we'll talk about Conor later. So that's my 4. That's my Mount Rushmore.
Hey, Mike, I'm just curious, since you have a relationship, because I'm a huge Chael Sonnen fan. So I'd love to hear your insight. Why do you think he never kind of produced the same as he did in the practice room, in the octagon in competition? Because he seems like mentally tough dude, he seems like he's got all the intangibles and all the tools. Why do you think that was?
I think Chael's means of competition was different. I'll say that Chael lives by a rule set that we don't. He has a different view of the world, and he gauges success quite differently than we do. Chael Sonnen is one of the most successful fighters in history. If you look at his resume, if you look at his bank account, if you look at his career today, Chael Sonnen today makes more money off of MMA than most UFC champions do at the moment. Now, the way he competed and won these fights and maybe didn't win some fights, there are outside circumstances that may or may not have been going on So every fight on Chael Sonnen's resume, Joe, is a victory, regardless of what the media tries to spin it as a loss. It's still a win for Chael P. Sonnen.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I see you nodding, Gal, but I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I obviously, Chael was down here for the end of his career. And, I worked with Ryan Parsons for years pretty closely. So, yeah, I got a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
Special dude, for sure.
Yes. I think he's somebody that, so I actually go back to my initial point. This is why you have to bucket people.
Yep.
So, for example, with hip hop, I actually think, and I can make a strong argument, that Ice Cube is the most important MC of all time.
Wow. All right.
So, but it's exactly what you said, Joe. It's exactly why you would put Chuck Liddell there. You're like, and then you could go on a list like, oh, he's not even the most lyrical. He's not the best selling. Okay, yeah. And Chuck doesn't have the best record. He doesn't have the best wins. But if you want to make the argument for best fighter ever or best MC, no. If you want to make the argument for most important, now you put Chuck Liddell in there. Now you put Hoist Gracie in there. Now you definitely put Chael in there. Right now you definitely put Conor. In fact, maybe that's your top four. No question. GSP is probably in that list as well. But this is a different thing, right? If you want to talk about
Ronda Rousey for the women,
for sure, no question for all. Actually, Ronda's importance carried over to men as well, because she's another one of those inflection points where salaries went up when Ronda Rousey became a thing.
Yes,
I mean across the board for everybody, salaries went up. Salaries went up because of Chael Sonnen. Salaries went up because of Conor McGregor. Like big time. So you're absolutely right, Joe. That's a good one. But then that's probably like, there's only a handful of those people who can say that. To go back to the analogy of Ice Cube, it's the same thing, right? Like better MCs, yeah, maybe more all this stuff, okay. But when you combine what he did politically, what he did with his records and how many like Hall of Fame tracks he has, with Friday, with movies, with all this stuff coming across the board, and you look at the whole impact on the movement, it's hard to beat with those guys. So when you compare that to like a Khabib, so let's take Khabib and let's take George and let's take Anderson Silva, who's a name that hasn't come up yet, right?
Yeah.
Imagine what would happen if Anderson would have retired after 10 title defenses. Instead, I think he did 15 or something?
Yeah. Imagine
what Demetrius Johnson would have done after 12 title defenses. So imagine Demetrius retires before he fights Cejudo the second time.
Yeah.
And then they might look like Khabib, right? It's like, geez, Anderson was whatever he was, 28-2, 16 straight title defenses, all these crazy numbers. It's hard to compare that to Khabib, who had 2 title defenses total. Well, okay, Khabib, do that 10 more times, and now you're not even matched what these other guys did. So and that's no knock on Khabib. That's good for him to walk. But George St. Pierre is sort of the same thing. Defended his title a whole bunch of times, but they were both smart enough to walk out before that losing streak happened.
Yeah. So
you got to be careful of looking at record sales or like the metrics, because they don't tell the whole story, because you have guys like Anderson or BJ who fought Chuck the same thing. Like you got to take the last 5 losses off their record. Like really, because in some cases like BJ's, like the last 8 fights or whatever, it's like they lost them all by they're not competitive. Well, if Khabib would have kept fighting, if George would have kept fighting, those losses would have happened too. And so instead of being 28-2, they would have been 28-7 or whatever the number was. And we've seen that boxers, the same thing, right? There's tons of those folks who the records look outstanding. They're 50-1, and then they go 1-7 over their 8 fights. So like all those are the arguments. And I think your list is good, Mike, because of that. And to round it out, like my reaction to Fedor is the same thing. Like he was the one I argued for years. But the problem was he fought, he never got over here and did it. And you're always going to hold that against him, which is not his fault. But at the end of the day, it was his fault, because he could have just said, you know what, like a few million or whatever the numbers are, like I have to go there and cement my legacy. And you've seen folks that have had that chance, and some do, and it backfires, some don't. But you have to reward the people, I think, that take the chance a little bit.
Yeah.
And you come over, and now eventually Fedor sort of did that. But I think I don't really care what happens for Fedor the rest of his fighting career, because to me, like his legacy is already over. He could lose 25 fights in a row. I don't really care. He could win 25 more fights, and I don't really care. because they're not at the highest level. So it doesn't really matter. So I think that's interesting. That's kind of our action. Like you have to think about, are you talking about impact? You're talking about talent, like a BJ, or are you talking about actual resume? Because those are all different conversations. And that's at least how I think about it. And Ronda would be your perfect example. So if you look at this now, like for whatever years ago, before she lost the first time, you would say Ronda's the best in all those categories for females.
Sure.
And now looking back, it's like, well, I don't know, like talent-wise, maybe she was. Because if she'd have fought 6 more fights in the UFC, I'm not sure how many more of those she would have won. Certainly a lot of them. Maybe, I don't know, maybe she could have. But impact-wise and where she was talent-wise at that time, there's no one even close, right?
Sure.
But it takes time for Amanda and all those other folks to build up their resumes now.
Agreed. Right now, I want to move this on. I got another very interesting topic for you gentlemen.
That little smirk on your fucking face, dude.
This is a good one. Now we have to leave this world. We have to leave this dimension, and we have to live in an alternate world where our beautiful wives did not exist and our children were simply impossibilities. So now we are talking about.
Mike, I hope you got your divorce lawyer ready, because all of us are calling after this. I don't know where this is going, but
Brandy's just waiting to hit that last button of the to call the lawyer. But
right outside that door. Right outside that door. Careful.
Well, I mean, in fairness, Mrs. Galpin kind of got sick of your shit and left you for a few days, right? Just to deal.
She's been sick of my shit for a long time.
What the question is, if you were not married today, what would you be doing? How would your life be different? Now, we love our wives. I'm 21 years now with Miss Brandy Dolce, beautiful children. I would not change it I would trade everything else in before I even traded one moment with them. But for this conversation here, let's have some fun. And for everyone here listening, if you weren't married right now, and Lord knows we've thought about it, and of course I'll share mine. If we weren't married, if we didn't have kids, but still, you're exactly who you are, same career, same everything, sitting right now. Tell me about your life. What would you be doing right now?
Hey, I might be down the Jersey Shore with you right now. That's first start right there.
Perfect.
46-year-old at DJ's, I'd be that guy.
Well, yeah, you'd be in the high percentile.
I hate to have a boring answer, but I don't know if my life would be much different. Well, you said if we're still doing the same thing, I was going to say I would have to be doing the same thing because I know a lot about a little. I don't have many hobbies. Like, this is my world. This is what I love. I would be pumping gas if I wasn't in strength and conditioning and the gym business. Nothing against people who pump gas, but that's what I would be doing. But I don't know. Maybe I'd be at more of those fitness expos with I'd be showing my face more at those the expos with the fitness chicks taking free pre-workouts and shit, trying to hook up. But that's about that would probably be the only difference.
Nice. So essentially, you'd be Lane Norton, except you would actually be single when you were running around doing it.
Holy Jesus! Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Right. I mean, what am I saying anything false here? Am I saying anything wrong here? Or am I just speaking the truth here? Someone's got to speak the truth, and Lord knows it's not fucking Lane. But hey, I digress here. Dr. Galpin, now, what would you be doing if you weren't married?
The marriage actually thing didn't change really anything. Like you guys, the real X factor was kids.
Yeah.
That's where the show stopped. The biggest thing that would be different is I used to travel a tremendous amount, and that's just, especially because my kids are so young. It's just, maybe coronavirus independent, it wouldn't have mattered. Yeah. There's just no travel. So a good example, I was able to go out for Ortega for the Ultimate Fighter for a week, which was already hard. Actually, more like I think 4 or 5 days or something. Had I not had kids, I'd have been there for 5 weeks.
Sure.
No question. Like, I would have flown back twice to see my wife for 2 days or something and gone back. I used to travel to all the events with the athletes, even internationally, whatever, going around to do whatever. I would have been going to Tokyo for the Olympics. I'd have been all this stuff. Yeah. I used to go quite a bit. So that's the big changes. Now I can't do nearly as much of that stuff. So it has to do more remote. It has to do, honestly, with like even remote coaching with the local folks. So I wouldn't have had any problem. Like, okay, I'll drive out to your gym. I'll do the 11 p.m. training. Cool. Like, no problem. Yeah. Even though I go to bed at 8 o'clock. No worries. But now I'm like, nope, I'm not doing it. Like, do the workout by yourself or whatever, because like I can't get home at midnight. My kids get up at 4. Like, there's no way I'm doing that. That's not sustainable. Or at least, like in camp, we'll do it. I'll do it twice a week, but I'm not doing it 4 days a week like I would have been able to do if it's just me or whatever. So that's the biggest change, is being able to be physically present in places.
Gotcha.
But I'd be still doing the same shit, because I was doing the same shit before I had kids anyways.
And I think all of us, I've been doing this shit my whole life. Like, I just say I'm doing the same shit. I just wear a different T-shirt. It's really what it comes down to. Maybe I'm.
So here's the thing: is I don't even change my T-shirt. That's the thing. It's like
same T-shirt.
I mean, I'm not kidding you. Like 4 days in a row, I've been wearing the same shorts.
And are they free, or they gift?
100% they're free.
Of course.
Everything. Actually, this is not a joke. This hat was free. This shirt was obviously free, and then the shorts I have on are free. The underwear, not free. I paid for those.
Free-ish, but you paid once 10 years ago for the underwear.
No question about it. And it was definitely like a Ross or something like that.
Right. And Joe, I like that shirt, by the way. I got to get one, buddy. I definitely want to wear that.
Yes, I got one for you. We got
my brother. That is awesome. So on this thing, wife, kids not here. I'm going to be a minimalist. I'm going to probably have a little 1-bedroom studio right on the beach, but I'm probably going to be living in a van. I'm going to be doing that van life thing, probably driving around, going out there to see Galpin, going out to see Tony Ricci, going up to see Joe DeFranco, going down to see Phil, like, going out to West Side, like, going up to see Mark Bell and that shit. I'm probably going to, because I'm still that guy, right? I still want to be that guy. I still want to be in the gym. Like, I still want that. I'm over the MMA travel stuff. I did that real hard early in my career, and I burnt out on that. I was over in England for 3 months straight with Rampage. I was married, but I didn't have kids, to your point, Andy. Absolutely. Mike, I say, you can't pay me enough to leave my fucking kids. Like, for me to do an overnight, all right, maybe, right? I'm going to see if I can bring them. And I'll foot the bill to bring my kids now when I travel, put them up in the hotel, do the deal, right? We can do some of that stuff. But I can't, I just don't want to leave them and miss those moments with them, right? That's really where my life is at. But definitely, like, van life, man, I'm all in van life. Whether I have a tow trailer or I'm just forest style, I'm just packed into a little conversion van driving. Probably not that, because no plumbing. That's not my thing. I'm a little bit of a hygiene freak, but still, that's probably the only difference, by the way.
You know what I miss the most? Actually, I didn't even think about this till you said it. I've said no to these just basically every single time the last couple of years, last 3 years. But what I miss is just the travel to somewhere with no actual really intention, whatever. Yeah. So like tons of the, hey, joke, Andy, come on out to my gym. Let's just hang out for 3 days. Like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, I don't know. Like, hell yeah. Like, I'd have gone out there and I'll go lift, and then I'll go work. You'll go work or whatever. I'll grab lunch. Now I'm going to take a call. Okay, cool. And you just like kind of hang out with someone that you don't really know.
Yep.
And you spend 2, 3, 4 days in their spot. And you're like, oh, sweet. Now we know each other. We do some things. I used to do that stuff a lot, like fly out to here, fly out to there. With gyms or other people's labs, in my case, or whatever stuff. And now it's just like, okay, is there a specific day I'm coming? What's the intent? Like, what are we doing? What's the plan? If not,
send me a bullet point list.
Right. If not, I can't do it, because I have to have something has to get accomplished that is on one of these top priorities, or I have to say no. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, because that is when a lot of the magic happens. Like in science, we talk about like all the best ideas and solutions are over beer. The same thing with training. It's just like, it's the in-between times. It's like when you're bullshitting before a workout or after workout or stuff. It's not like the plan, let's meet up, let's have a call, I want to talk about, okay, like that helps, but the magic is in between. So that stuff I do miss a lot.
Yeah, I agree. But
I don't miss it more than I miss my kids. So,
it's a game changer for sure. All right. Now, you got something, Joe, on that before we jump?
No, I just agree, because it goes fast. Like I was telling you guys before, how when I first started going to Connecticut, training midnight, training Triple H and Steph at midnight, I'd get home 3 a.m, go to bed at 4. Kids would wake me up at 6, and you're aggravated and you're tired, but I would do it, and I would be sleep deprived because I didn't want to miss out on those moments with them, because now it literally feels like I blinked and my kids are going to be 10 next month. And now they're already at the age where they get home from school and they're out the door. They don't want anything to do with me or my wife. Like it went so fast where you went from like daddy superhero to, hey, Dad, I'm going down the street to my friend's house. See you later. Don't bother me. Don't embarrass me. Like it's over already. So yeah, anyone out there with young kids, man, spend the time while you got it, because I sound like a typical old man dad, but that shit goes way too fast. And then you miss them nagging you or asking you to do stuff. You know, you would give anything for that again. So goes quick. Take advantage of it.
That's it, man. Well, I'm definitely in that beautiful nagging phase with a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and it's precious, man. And I'm very aware of it. I truly focus on being present in the moment. I try and like push my ego aside, which is really hard, and not get caught up in all that, assuming that Instagram is a part of my business. Therefore, I have to scroll and look at 47 G strings, pass through before I get to a 5-minute physio, let's say, or something along those lines. So I agree. Now, jumping into something slightly different once again, and I think this will be a fun one. Dorian Yates versus Arnold with regards to their training style. And you guys are great individuals to speak on this. So basically the Dorian Yates, circa Mike Menser, circa Arthur Jones, super high intensity training versus the Arnold Schwarzenegger, super high volume training. Arnold would be in the gym 6 hours a day, 2-3 hours in the morning, 2-3 hours in the afternoon, where we get a Dorian Yates that would be in the gym 45 minutes, 4 days a week. So what do you guys think on this? And really for those watching now, maybe what little takeaways can they get? Is one better than the other? Does one totally suck? Do they both have a place? Can they be run concurrently? Should they be separated? Let's break this down a little bit. Let's take about 5 minutes on this one. And Andy, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Joe.
Joe, sorry, I didn't say it. Yep.
I was just, my answer might be boring because I feel like this is one of those things where clearly they have both worked. They're both freaks, and you can't really argue with either one. Personally, I tried the super high intensity when I first started reading up Mike Menser, and I had the Dorian Yates Blood and Guts VHS tape. It never worked for me. Like, as hard as I tried to push myself for those 1 or 2 sets, like I just felt like it was never enough. And but with that being said, I know people who absolutely love that style. I think, your personality has a lot to do with the style of training that you'll gravitate towards. Genetic makeup, like there's so many different factors, but I think what the biggest thing we could learn from both those guys, 2 legends in the industry, is there's more than one way to skin the cat. There's more than one form of training that works. I think everything can work, or almost everything can work. Nothing works forever. I think it's important to your body is going to adapt, and then it's important to know your body and know when it is the appropriate time to switch things up, change things. I always say a good example is the best. When I think of like the best results where my body transformed the most in my life, one was when I first started training like everyone else. I had never done it before. 13, 12 years old, my dad brings me to the gym. And even though I was training for football, I look back, it was still more of like a bodybuilding type of split. We basically did 10 reps of everything. We did chest and back, legs one day, shoulders and arms the next day. And I mean, the results that first year were insane. Like we talk about newbie results on what would be considered more of a basic bodybuilding program. Then that's 12, 13 years old. At like 20, 21, I discovered Louis Simmons' West Side Barbell, researched everything, got obsessed with that, and then implemented that the best I can and the best I knew how by myself. Now I'm doing like dynamic effort, sets of 2 and 3, but as fast as I can. And what would not traditionally be a bodybuilding or muscle building program, that's more geared towards, you think of West Side, you think powerlifting, you think strength, you think power. that was the most jacked I ever got. And I think it's just because the sheer variety of it, it was so different than anything my body has ever done, even though they weren't traditional hypertrophy techniques that I was using. It was just so different that my body responded. And this was after, training for almost 10 years. So I wasn't a newbie anymore. So I think that's just a good example to show people, instead of arguing over like what's better, what's worse, as usual, the answer depends, lies somewhere in the middle. And you need to know the situation, their background, how did they previously train, et cetera, and then that will get you to the best way for that person to train at that time. But to just say Dorian's way is better than Arnold's or Arnold's way is better than Dorian, I couldn't really say that. They could both work.
Awesome. Yeah, excellent. Andy.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. This is really interesting. Actually, I could spend a couple hours just answering this, but I'll try to keep it a couple of minutes. So, number one, just to clarify, if these people are a little bit new to you, obviously Arnold's not new to anybody, but when we talk about Mike Metzer's high intensity training, it's not interval training. Yeah. It's not the new hit like high intensity interval training. That refers to traditionally a very, very, very long repetition to max effort. So these are 20 or 30-second reps, if you will, or whatever. Yeah. So it's very, very short workouts with typically very, very slow movements. All right. So this is not the interval stuff you're talking about. Like, oh my God, the guy just did 30 on, 30 off and looked like that. Like, no, it's the old school HIIT training. And those of us old strength conditioning people know that immediately, but I wanted to make sure the folks that, hadn't maybe had a history weren't confused by that. So you can see old videos of Mike Metzer out there coaching people and stuff. What I think, though, the answer is, of course, like you said, Joe, it depends on a lot of situations. But one thing to think about is, I think it highlights, and you actually wrapped this point up so beautifully, Joe, it highlights what we now know in terms of the mechanisms that cause muscle hypertrophy. And so we now know that, hey, high tension or really heavy things actually do cause a tremendous amount of hypertrophy. So when you went to instead of doing 50% of your 1 rep max for a 1 minute long rep, okay, that's great. Well, what if you did 95% for a set of 1, but you did 15 sets of that? Well, the tension is so high that will actually induce a decent amount of hypertrophy. We also know that another mechanism is metabolic stress, which is the burn, right? And so, okay, now look at Metzer's protocol. It's a tremendous amount of burn. The load is light, but the fatigue is extremely high. That's the second mechanism of hypertrophy. And then your third one is a bit of muscular damage. And when you look at the classic Arnold 8 to 12, 6-hour workouts, per day, you're not getting the load that you get with powerlifting, because you can't do 10 reps at the same weight that you can do 1 rep, of course, if you're going to maximum intent on those. But you can't do as much contraction as you're doing it with a 30-second interval, but you can do much heavier, right? Because you're getting a lot of rest in between. And so with Arnold's, you're going to get a little bit of combination of tension, stress, and a little bit of damage. And so it's funny because, again, I always say that bro science is actually usually right. We just don't know it yet. Like it's way more right than people give bro science credit for, especially when you come to the bodybuilding community. For a year, I could go on and on about the things that we've said. Oh, that's bro science. That doesn't work. And now, like, research is like, actually, it does. Like, shit. So those guys got a lot of things right. They typically just messed up on explaining why things work. They didn't know the physiology, or they had it incorrect, or they're meatheads about it. But in terms of what gets results, it's hard to argue Dorian Yates versus Arnold, right? So to wrap up my answer, yes, you should try them both. They both have merit, but it depends on context. So in this question, we sort of started off with an underlying assumption that was never said that is important, that we're assuming your goal is to simply maximize hypertrophy. We're not talking about developing an athlete. We're not talking about best training programs for MMA. So this is totally different. So if you simply want to maximize your hypertrophy, this is the apropos discussion. Like this, and now we start talking about, okay, actually it probably doesn't matter. Find what works for you. Had you taken this example and said, what do you think training style is better for MMA? Yates or Arnold? I'd say both are terrible. What are you talking about? This is a horrific approach for an MMA fighter. So we have to, the answer I always will give, and the question I tell my students to always ask is, when you understand what training or supplement or sleep or any routine is best, or is A better than B, the question you first have to ask yourself is, what's the situation and what's the goal? What are we going for? If you're just the average person out there, I actually think that the HIIT training, the Metzger system is pretty solid, because of the fact that you can just blow yourself to pieces in 30 minutes. And for a lot of folks, if it's like, hey, I only have 30 minutes twice a week, this is a lot better than going in and spending 30 minutes doing calf extension. Right? Like you do plantar flexion, dorsiflexion in your calf, and that takes you, and then your workout time is up. You're not going to get a lot of results if you get to work out twice a week. This is not going to happen. I'd rather you go in and do a single set of leg press until you throw up and then leave. You're probably going to get more global results for the person who can work out, twice a week. If you are the guy like we were when we were 23, and you are willing to spend 6 hours a day in the gym 6 days a week, well, then the Arnold system is probably a bit better, because you can get more consistent movements and you can do a higher variety of movement patterns. The downside of the HIIT program is, you do 1 or 2 movements a day, typically, maybe a few more, but with Arnold, you could do 50, 60 different movement patterns. Whatever, you can do as many as you want. So it's just pros and cons, right? It's what's the situation, what's the scenario. So the Arnold system is typically, what I'd say is one of the major reasons why we lost people's buy-in with resistance training. And this is actually, I blame Arnold for creating CrossFit. So I think CrossFit was the exact response to the Arnold system. So sorry, I'm going to clear my throat. So anyways, you take the Arnold system and you say, all right, you're going to go in the gym, you're going to spend 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, you do it 6 days a week, and you're going to do 15 different bicep workouts and blah, 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 blah. And people are like, okay, great. And they did this. And they're like, 6 weeks later, yeah, like I'm bigger, but I can't, this is unfeasible. Like I'm not working, I'm not seeing my kids or whatever. And people and they also were like, I'm kind of out of shape, because I went to the gym, I worked out for an hour and a half, and I did nothing but triceps. And like cardiovascularly, I'm not in good shape. I don't feel athletic. Like I'm kind of getting tight everywhere. I'm not moving. I don't feel good. Joints getting beat up because we're just smashing volume after volume, because they're doing the Arnold workout, year 1. And it's like you should be doing like Arnold's year 1 workout, not Arnold's year 15 workout. And so we had small joint injuries pop up, and you had burnout just massively. And people were like, ugh, I don't want to go to the gym and sit on that machine and do this and blah, blah, blah. And you created a space for someone like CrossFit to come in and go, okay, we'll have you in and out of the gym in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, a la Metzer. But we're not doing a machine leg extension for 15 minutes. You're going to do snatches, kettlebell swings, pull-ups, as much as you can. You're going to feel a pump everywhere. You're going to feel strong, and you're getting a huge cardiovascular dump. So you're going to lose weight, which you're not going to get a lot of with, oftentimes like the isolation stuff, right? Because we're going to do big muscle groups, high quality movements. You're going to feel the pump. You're going to feel strong because it is heavy, and you're going to feel like you're smashing in the workout, and we're going to have you out of here in 40 minutes total. You're not going to feel the residual problem. You're not going to feel the burnout. And so I think that's exactly what created the space for CrossFit to come in. And then, of course, CrossFit had all of its own problems. But to me, that was a reaction to the approach of, spending your entire Saturday on just forearm kind of thing. So.
Well, every 14-year-old kid's spending his whole Saturday on forearms.
Oh,
hey now. And that'll actually bring me to the next topic, which is a nice little segue here, not quite the same. But if you had to choose between A, having no hands, or B, having no feet, tell me what and why.
Joe's first.
Thank you. Oh, gee, thank you. No hands or no feet. You got to go. I got to go. No feet, just because I'm an upper body guy, Jersey Shore guy. I think I can get around. Like you said, recovering from major shoulder surgery. But then that gives us an excuse not to train legs. We get jacked. We're good to go.
And you can do leg extensions, Menser style, with no feet, right? Just set the pad at the proper height, mid-shin. You're good to go.
Listen, I'd love to do legs with you guys today, but I got no feet.
Oh, I'm 10. Oh, I'm fucking 10.
Joe Jersey right there, Joe. I love it, brother.
Yeah, hashtag Jersey right there.
You're going to have to clean the audio up on my end. That probably sounded like a hyena over there. I'm crying. That was so funny.
Well, I'll jump in. I agree. No.
Walked right into that one, yeah. You can't ask a question that question.
These are tears.
Yeah. Oh, shit.
I can't follow that up. Next question.
I know. Joey D fucking takes that one. Now, we'll jump into something. Again, new topic. I wish I knew. Go back in time. Man, where you fucked up. I wish I knew. And share as much of it as you want to share. I wish I knew. Not like, what would you tell yourself 20 years ago? Fucking buy Tesla, Apples. No, none of that shit. Somewhere where you fucked up. We all fuck up in life. Where did you fuck up? And then what did you wish you know back then? And maybe kind of make a little change.
Andy, you could start this one. I need a, unless you
Well,
need
let me
some
go. I'll go first. I'll give you guys some segue. I'll show some vulnerability here. I wish I was not so hardlined early, and I still am pretty hardline. Man, I'm a fucking whole food guy. Synthetic toxic chemicals, fuck you. You're lying to your people. Other guys out there, they go from zone to paleo to keto to fasting, and they're slinging product. Man, that's bullshit. I'm really hardlined on that, and I'm not going to change, but I let that hardline attitude maybe affect conversations that could have been beneficial. And maybe, I don't want to say I burned a bridge, but there probably have been hurt feelings along the way because I'm very adamant in my belief system. And I'm very, not controversial, but confrontational in that. This is what I think. And again, maybe this is very Jersey. This is what I think. Prove me wrong, motherfucker. Like that type of attitude. And that's not the best type of attitude, I think, for long term. And I look back at points in my career where there's good people that they were just trying to pay their bills and take care of their family. But they jumped the shark, man. And they were selling some BS and they were smart enough to know it. And I never called anyone out by name, and I'm not that guy, and I still won't. But I know behind the scenes there were some hurt feelings. And maybe I should have had these conversations earlier privately instead of allowing the caffeine and the bravado to maybe come out and to be right. Because, you know, as muscle heads and strength guys and you know, fucking whatever these things that we all have this ego. When we're doing something, it's, man, this way is the best way. Think about it like a Louis Simmons. Tell Louis he's wrong. You can get 10 great coaches that have equal results in certain areas. Louis will say, oh, 9 of them are wrong. Louis right. We're all like that in our own way. And for me, I wish I was less like that earlier in my career. And now I think I definitely have at least the context of when I say things, I'm much more intentional. And I certainly try to reach out now privately and quietly to find out, hey, why are you doing this when 3 years ago you were saying something completely different? And I know you're a smart guy or gal. I know you're smart. What are you doing here? Oh, it's just a marketing ploy. It's a pivot. You hired a new CMO and now they're shaking it up, and you have a VC who's sniffing around. You're trying to create this new thing, and it's legacy money. Well, all right. I kind of lose respect, to be honest, but it gives me a little bit more. So anyway, that's kind of me. I wish I wasn't such a douchebag.
Yeah, that's a hard one for me because my answer could be the same, right? I'm sure, Joe, you'd say the same thing. I am always thankful that we didn't have social media when I was in my early 20s. Because I was the same way. Right? I was very quick to say someone else is full of shit without actually taking too much time to look into the thing, you know, just assuming I knew more. The classic learner versus knower. I made a very intentional switch in that, late 20s, if you will, probably something like that. And that has made a big difference. So I'm pausing to say that I wish I would have known other things, because I feel like that bravado and that confidence is also part of you. And it is what gets you, it gets you failures, which you need, right? So it's like, had you been a nicer guy, Mike, you wouldn't have had some of those relationships blow up. And then you wouldn't have had that learning experience that says, like, you don't want to do this again.
Yeah.
Right. So it's tough there. I also feel like getting clients and getting athletes early in your career, you do need to sound confident, even when you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. Because if not, you're never going to get anybody kind of anywhere. I certainly wish I would have been more open to, or I wish I would have known more about, I would say, like, in my opinion, like the one that's jumped to my attention is supplementation. So I've generally been very much, I don't want to say against supplements, but I've been against people who go outside of the standard 5. It's like, okay, we had a lot of evidence on caffeine and creatine and protein, and okay, great. And then it's like, oh, I'm taking, ZMA. Like that's bullshit. Why? It's like, well, I don't really know, but it's probably bullshit. So it's like, okay, maybe you should have stopped and looked at least what ZMA is before you ran around telling everyone ZMA is stupid. Yeah. And it turns out I was mostly right on most of them because they are mostly a hack, right? And they are mostly unnecessary. But that doesn't mean they're not anymore. And now, like, there's something I use very diligently in my career because we can get assessment, we can get analyses, and we can figure out. You can titrate things and you can run tests and figure out. And I think it's difficult for especially the sports that we work in to survive without supplementation, especially when you consider any weight-based sport where more calories is not an option, right? So it's like, hey, in football, it's like you can just solve this by giving them more food. Yeah, well, right, but we can't solve that when we have to go down to calories. So it's like, well, make smarter food choices. I can't do that because I don't get to have food. Like the food is limited, whether we're traveling or because of calories. So I would have probably paid more attention. I wish I would have known more about the other side of the equation. And I would also say kind of earlier in my career, like most folks, when you first get into nutrition specifically, it's macros. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's important. But if you're a nutrition expert and your knowledge stops at understanding how many grams of protein and carbohydrate to give somebody, you're probably not very good at your job. You might get some results here and there, but you probably should really understand fiber, soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. What are you giving them? You need to understand on some level micronutrients like phytochemicals. Okay, like I don't think you really have to know numbers on that yet, but you should understand and realize, like, is it better to give them, like, what is the difference? Like, is there really a lot of sugar in a carrot? Like, are you sure? Like, have you really thought that through? Or are you just like, yep, sugar, those are high glycemic index. Carrots, we don't give them to you. Or we do give them to you. Like, we probably should have investigated this a little bit further. So some of the finer details of past macros, I think would have been, I wish we would have known that earlier in my career. But my biggest answer would be the same as yours, Mike. It's just being less of a dick, being less sure of your opinion. I'm just glad that I didn't get to espouse it in public much.
I laughed so hard, man. Thank God social media wasn't around through my 20s because I would have been picking fights probably with everyone.
Yeah.
And I would have lost.
We probably would have picked fights with each other.
I'm sure. And to find out, I mean, you just knowing your stuff, Andy, we're probably most aligned, I would say, of most of those in our industry, especially on the nutrition side. Yeah. We're really, you're picking hairs here, I think, in the major differences where you're more of a micro, and I saw your 5-minute physio yesterday. You're more of a micro, and Joe, I'll let you finish this here in a second, but you hammer the micro and the phyto side. You never hear that, and that's something after Joe goes. I'd like to touch on that. Also, I want to talk on this plant toxicity here in a minute. So that's going to come. I'm going to hedge that right now and let Joe go in and kind of finish this one because I think this is a good topic. I wish I knew. I think I'm in my mid 40s now. I'm at that stage of life where I really am reflective, and I look back in all things, all relationships. God, hopefully I got another 45 plus to go. Man, I better do this next half better. That's kind of what I'm looking at right now, which is why, being home with my kids and making the pancakes and doing the whole thing. But you look back in career. So Joe, what do you think? I'm going to actually jump in before Joe goes to keep your idea here, because I actually totally forgot about like most of my answer. And this is going to go to you. I wish I would have known that there are strength training exercises besides squats, clean and jerks, and snatches. Because that's what I told you. I would have basically told you to fuck off if you said anything besides that. Overhead press, deadlift, like I wish I would have known way more about movement stuff. I don't necessarily mean like crawls and rolling and things like that, but just like
how to train besides a barbell and squatting and pressing. And I did not pay attention to that at all. I thought it was all stupid, all completely wasted. And part of it was the functional movement crowd's own self-sabotage. But I wish I would have learned more. And in fact, I find myself doing a lot more learning of the basic, the things that have gotten more in vogue now, like foot stuff and just movement, like different movement plans, and paying attention to other strength and conditioning coaches that weren't just weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting focused, or powerlifting. Like that basically was my thing, and it else was stupid. So I wish I would have known more about those modalities earlier, and would have saved my own career and health probably a lot. So anyways.
I was going to say, you kind of stole, I had one for training and one for more kind of business relationships. The training, that was it, I was such a bench squat, deadlift, heavy sled drag, and everything else was bullshit. Like, as far as now, we're so much more, and we still do those things, but just movement quality being number one, doing an assessment. If someone bench presses and they go, oh, that bothers my shoulder a little bit, instead of just saying, hey, do another set, maybe it'll go away, like figuring out what's the problem, let's work on that. And I really feel like moving well is the number one thing that you can do today to prevent yourself from pain, surgery, problems later on. So yeah, and same thing like Andy said, I think I didn't want to be part of that like FMS crowd. I was like the sports performance meathead guy, so I wasn't going to waste time on all that, all that's like, I thought you were a pussy if you spent too much time on looking at the feet and looking at how someone walks and their gait and their move. So now that would be number one, is just how much more our programming now revolves around movement quality first, then overload someone in an exercise. You don't want to build kind of strength on top of dysfunctional movement. I've seen that to be the biggest problem. You see, person can't do a body weight squat, but since barbell squats are on your program, you throw a heavy barbell on their back, and now they do an improper heavy barbell squat, and you wonder why their back, their knees, everything else is bothering them. So that would be, I wish I knew as far as training. And then business relationship wise, starting out the first 10, 12 years of my business, I was just a gym, and 100% of my income was through my personal training and my gym business. I wish I knew that it is okay for other gyms to be around, and there's enough business to go around for all of us. Because I took offense if like a gym opened up 10 miles away from me, they were pieces of shit. And if your friend went to that gym, like, what the hell's wrong with them? Now it's funny, I look at some of my best relationships in this industry. Guys, I just did this seminar with Zach Evanesh, Jay Ferrugia. We're all guys from New Jersey. We live within 30, 40 minutes of each other, all had similar gyms, have similar gyms, similar clientele, but we all did great. Like, we all make a living. We don't have to really compete against one another. We all actually have relationships with each other, and we all do well. Like, I finally realized I can't train everyone in the world, even if I wanted to. There's not enough hours in the day, not enough, manpower. So you're not going to train everyone anyway. So it's okay to have some, other gyms, other competitions without getting mad at them. You could kind of check your ego out the door. And last 10, 12 years, I more have tunnel vision, and I just try to be the best I can be and make my gym the best it could be. Doesn't mean other gyms can't do well. I'm fine with that, but I just kind of focus more on my own gym and my own business, and I don't worry so much about what other people are doing, because we could all do well and all still get along. But I didn't know that early on, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I want to take a brief second here to shout out Dr. Beau Hightower is in the house watching the live stream. Everyone is probably already following Dr. Beau Hightower on YouTube. 1.3 million subscribers. I mean, god dang, what an amazing channel Dr. Beau Hightower has. Everyone who follows our content should also be following Dr. Beau Hightower. Would love to get Dr. Beau, who is a friend, a personal friend. Doc, I appreciate you, my my brother, and I just wanted to shout him out because he's had some really nice comments for us as we've continued on for this. Now, the next thing I want to speak about, maybe slightly controversial or not, the whole animal-based versus plant-based, and I'm going to point here to recently, we actually highlighted George St. Pierre's new animal-based meal plan. We know George, GSP, one of the greatest athletes of all time, has had quite a few dramatic changes to his nutrition plan over the years now. And hey, it is what it is. I think, my personal opinion, he's a high-level athlete. He doesn't have anything to compete against now, and he's a little bored, and he has access to different ideologies. So he's working with Dr. Paul Saladino, who is the CarnivoreMD, and George is following an animal-based meal plan. Though it's not a carnivore meal plan, and George is following, we pointed out, myself and Professor Lindsay Howard, our lead dietitian here at the DOLCE Diet and Fitness, we pointed out that George is actually following an omnivorous meal plan. He's an omnivore. He's eating like an omnivore, but it's being labeled and marketed as an animal-based and a carnivore and the CarnivoreMD. And I'm not mad at Paul at all for this, by the way. It's not like I'm criticizing Paul on this one. I definitely want to get him on and chat with him. But I wanted to get your take on this, where Paul makes a few assertions here that I don't agree with personally, that really pushes the animal products. But I believe the science is flawed. And it's misleading, if nothing else. And maybe, Andy, you can jump on in this one. I think you have the best command of the topic, where Paul's pushing towards the least toxic vegetables and the most toxic, basically saying leafy greens, nightshades, peppers and onions and legumes and broccoli and grains and nuts and seeds, that these are toxic and they should never be eaten. And then there's less toxic, which should be eaten a little bit, some berries, some honey, some avocados, some dates, more of the sweet side. Andy, do you have any context on this? Not trying to bash Paul, but really just share some information. It's an interesting conversation that was born off of the exclusionary restrictive fad dietary tribe as they went, in my opinion, from paleo to keto to the carnivore intermittent fasting kind of death fast hybrids as we see now. But we can go back to the warrior diet and Ori Hofmenkler, and that's 20 some odd or 15 some odd 20 years ago or so. But anyway, Andy, what do you think about are there toxic vegetables out there? Should we be worried about eating broccoli or peppers?
So a couple of things. I don't know Paul. We have a ton of mutual friends. I'm sure he's a fantastic guy. I don't know. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he's not a Dave Asprey, that he's not one of these other complete nutbags trying to steal people's money and just a complete crook. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
On that list. Well, maybe that's another conversation for another day, by the way.
Yeah. So I'll just say he's a great guy and has his things. It does go back to the conversation we had earlier that this is always context dependent, right? So who's using it? What's going on with them? What are they doing? What are their goals? What's their physiology? So everything is there. So the other thing I want to say is I actually encourage people. I think people should explore dietary changes more often. I'm totally fine with people playing with fasting. I think you should absolutely go no carb for a while. You should absolutely do all kinds of crazy shit. Like, why not? Life is fun, and see how your body feels. Do something different, and really learn about food. You will learn much more.
Let me steer this back though, and I agree. I understand. I want to steer this towards everyone takes it, kind of what we were saying before. I wish I knew. They take the hard line and they say, they build their platform. This is the best. Sean Baker, this is the best. Dave Asprey, even, this is the best.
Well, yeah, this is my point. I was saying. So I'm a fan of you. I'll explore those things. And if George St. Pierre wants to do something, I don't give a shit. But that's a classic example of fallacy, authority of fallacy, right? So just because George does it, therefore it's great. I don't care what George does. It doesn't matter. Pick Beyonce doing it, Tiger Woods. I don't give a shit. That doesn't matter to me at all. Those things are star power, but they're not relevant. So having said all that, and you can get Lane on if you want, and you guys can go over the specifics of the science because he finds more interest in that. But my general answer to your question, Mike, is I don't find any of that interesting. It's blatantly false, to be honest with you. And I don't find it interesting. I don't want to go on there and hash through all the stuff because Lane Norton will do it. Lane will put a 750-page thing, and those guys can go back and forth. But to me, those are uninteresting for multiple reasons. Are we talking about a professional athlete? Or are we talking about general population? And either way, it fails on too many lines of logic. It fails teleologically. It fails ancestrally. It fails micronutrient-wise. It fails on a randomized control trial. It fails on longevity stuff. It fails on every level, with the possible exceptions of you want to do something different, or you've tried a bunch of things and that's not working, so you're going here. So if they want to come up with solutions for very small amounts of people, that's great. And if you're one of those people, you're probably very helpful. You're thankful that people have spent time there. But those are never issues I will ever encounter with an athlete. Almost, I can say that pretty carefully. I will never have somebody having toxicity issues because of lettuce. That's ridiculous. I mean, flat out, it is plain ridiculous. It's also not a global solution, right? So those are just my personal bias. That's what I care about. Are we talking about things that the general public needs to stay away from? You're trying to tell the general public not to eat Brussels sprouts? Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, this is not causing any global pandemic. This is not causing any of our obesity issues. This is not causing any of our chronic disease because people are eating fantastic diets. They're hydrated, they're sleeping well, their stress is managed, but yet they're eating almonds. Like, you're absurd. And I'm not even saying he's making that claim. So don't put words sort of in my mouth there. But that's, to me, when I see this, I'm like, these are not real problems. These are not problems for an athlete. There's absolutely nothing wrong with legumes or nightshades or grains or any of these things. Those things are not toxic. I don't think they globally understand what the word toxic means when they say that. So yeah, another, like, and Dave, I don't mind calling out because you don't have to, right? But he's a complete joke. And he's been a joke for years. I mean, even Rogan called him out fucking 7 years ago. Yeah. It was like, this guy's a nutbag, right? And if you can't, with your kookery, you can't convince Rogan, I mean, it's very, very, very bad, right? So he's a guy, like, if you see Dave Asprey's stuff, like, he's one of the worst offenders of snake oil, right? He's one of the worst offenders of taking advantage of people. I mean, he's just awful.
Dave actually make up quite a bit of lies on the Rogan show. Is that what Rogan called him out for? I don't want to.
I don't remember in detail, but he's done nothing but make up lies his entire career.
Okay.
So you don't have to go very far to figure out just all the complete shit he's pulled out. But he's also someone who, like, he's blatantly and openly doesn't give a fuck. Like, he does not care at all about like the perception of any of that stuff. So. And again, I don't want to put Paul in the same category as him. Paul may be the same. He may not be. He may be a fantastic guy who just wants to help people eat better food. So I don't know anything about Paul. I don't know him personally. Like I said, we have a lot of mutual friends. He's probably a great guy. But again, for me, I don't find this stuff interesting. Like, people ask me all the time to do, like, what's your thoughts on carnivore? I'm like, I don't care. I'm not doing it. And none of the athletes I ever work with are going to do it. So like, it's just like, I don't care if someone was like, hey, there's a new diet of all raw vegetables. Like, great. I know a guy who's done that, actually. I interviewed him. Hilarious. One of the greatest. Like, he grew up with all these bodybuilders, by the way. Dorian Yates, like, all these guys. Yeah. So he comes from he's super jacked and in his 90s, and eats nothing but raw vegetables. I'm like, that's cool. I find it actually interesting, like, minutely, personally. But if you think I think that's a real solution for anybody, for either a global population or an athlete, like, I just don't. It's not worth my time, I guess is the way to say it. The chances of it working relative to the normal stuff we can practice are so small that it's such a huge investment of time for such a low likelihood of payback. For me, with all the stuff I got going on, like, the way I guess I'll end this is saying, if you want me to do something that far outside of the norm, you have to present me with that much, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so you can't take a small amount of tangential evidence and try to convince me to do something completely outside the norm. That's not how logic works. If you want to take the time, and 30 years from now, that small amount of evidence that's available does turn into a large evidence base, I will happily stand up and say, yep, I was late on this one. I didn't do it. But I'm okay not, because over the years, very rarely are you going to turn out to be wrong with my approach. So these things think, I mean, I guess I've now talked for 10 minutes about something I just initially said I'm not very interested in. But that's my opinion, honestly. Is like, when I see someone say things like leafy greens are toxic for you, honestly, I don't spend 2 more seconds thinking about it, because you're just trying to grab attention. It's not real.
It's not real. And he said blatantly false. And I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest takeaway. And of course, I agree with that. And it's unfortunate because you get highly accredited individuals like a Dr. Paul Saladino, and there's others out there. And man, I'll even push back to Dr. Dom D'Agostino years ago on Rogan, was making his whole case for keto. Well, he's got a great resume and academic background, but what he was saying was blatantly false. And how he could make such statements while being so accredited creates this confusion to the population. This is where I go back to my statement before. I get really fucking pissed and passionate because part of our business is working one-on-one with regular folks. And guys, when they call us, they work with it, they're so confused. They're so disheartened, disenfranchised in organized dieting, let's say, and that's not what we espouse over here. We have to listen to these horror stories about them not being able to shit for 2 weeks or not being able to stop shitting for 2 weeks because they followed one of these type of blatantly false plans instead of just educating them on just general health. You know, healthful whole foods is the terminology that we use. What's local, what's organic, devoid of synthetic toxic chemicals. Let's kind of start a well-rounded basic meal plan that you enjoy. And we'll kind of just our system anyway. We'll help people kind of scale out and find what fits, what makes sense for them. But by saying greens, leafy greens are bad, peppers are bad, onions are bad, I can't have chia seeds. I mean, I can't, none of this is.
Well, I guess I'll a couple more thoughts on this. Now that you got me kind of riled, I would say
before you say that, can I just ask one thing? Maybe you're going to talk about this. Can you guys just explain to me what their definition of toxic is?
Okay. This is exactly where it's going to go. The thing I have the most issue with this post about is calling things toxic. I know what you're trying to do. Like, you're trying to simplify to deliver the message. And look, the reality is we all do that at some point, right? In order to have effective communication, you have to simplify. But the connotation here is why I said blatantly false, because it's blatantly not toxic. Toxic has a specific definition, and it has an inference that consumed at a normal level, it is excessively harmful, right? Something like this. Like, none of those are true. If consumed at now, everything has a toxicity curve. Everything has a hormetic curve, right? So you could have too much water and drown. You could have too little of it. Everything has a toxicity curve. Now, some things like vitamin D, technically there's a toxicity curve on vitamin D, but it's very, very, very extreme. Like, you could take a 10 or 20x dose of vitamin D supplementally for months before you reach any level of likely toxicity. So technically there's a toxicity curve on these things. So I guess if you want to say like, well, if you ate 700 servings of broccoli a day, 6 months later, you might have a toxic level of oxalate. Okay, technically you're right, but how people are saying this, it's not true. Yeah. This is blatantly not true in the context of everything else being there. So that's why I say like it's blatantly false. Although they could, like kind of like play games with words and semantics of some studies. It's not true. It's not. It's demonstrably false that like folks could have a perfect health. The other game they would play with this semantically would be, well, there are some people, for example, with nightshades, and this is documented scientifically, that don't handle nightshades well. And then that's totally true, right? And so for folks, and I have actually had this with athletes, where you do take nightshades away and they do have some symptoms, autoimmune systems typically will go down. Okay, great. And so they, for a bunch of reasons that you don't care about right now, there are reasons why leafy greens can be bad for some folks. That's absolutely demonstrably true. Totally a possibility. It's just very unlikely, and it's not the norm. And as this graphic depicts, it's writing it up as if the normal thing is that these are toxic for you when consumed for most people at a normal dosage. And that's not close to true at all. It is, at best, slightly bad for you for some small percentage of people when consumed at high dosage. But that's not what the graphic is intending to show. And so that's why I say like it's demonstrably false quickly. It's just not there. So that would be the major issue. And I don't even remember the point I was going to jump back in on, but
I think the issue is it's the conflation of a bullet point and building a marketing campaign around that with a specified product. I'm looking at that.
Okay, I remember now. Sorry, I'm cutting you back off again. Because you brought up the keto thing. Here's a good example. Okay, how many questions did you get about keto from athletes 2 or 3 or 4 years ago? Like nonstop, right?
Never.
It got. Now, how many do you get? And now I don't get them anymore. My point is, keto was all the rage for a couple of years. It got all popular, and then what happened? Athletes started trying it, and it didn't work very well. And now, I don't get those questions anymore. We don't hear hardly anyone talk about keto for athletes. Keto for people who don't work out, okay, probably not a terrible option. And so if you go back to the very beginning, say 10 years ago, whatever, and I'll say this. I for sure 10 years ago would have said keto was completely bullshit. It's dangerous. It's bad for you. That was wrong. And the keto folks showed it's not bad for your health. In fact, you can survive probably a perfectly, in fact, for a lot of folks, it might enhance your health. However, the pushback was appropriate when we started talking about athletic performance in almost every athlete case. And so if you take my position, which is you're making a claim that's way outside the status quo, show me extensive evidence before I change. And I didn't change. I still said, for an athlete, this is not good. Okay, I was wrong about this little piece over here, which is it's not bad for your health if you're a non-exerciser and you're sitting around. Okay, I missed the weight loss thing. I thought, okay, I missed this. But I didn't change it for the athletes. And now it's swung back and it said there's science, there's athletes that have tried it. And now most people are like, you know what, you're right. And so by not moving with every little fad diet that gets excited, you do miss a few things here and there, but for the bulk, you're going to be right more often than you're wrong. Yeah. And that's what I mean when I say, like, show me why keto is better for an athlete. At best you could do is show me it will maybe get you back to the same level, but it was never, and is still never, ever shown a performance enhancing effect. And so this is like why you have to push back on these things is show me the evidence that this makes my athletes better. Show me the evidence that my athlete on a great program by simply cutting out Brussels sprouts is going to be less toxic, because you can't. You're going to lose that every single time. So I'm not going to put you on an all-stick diet. So I don't have to prove to you that your thing is wrong. You have to prove to me your thing is better. And until you prove to me it's better, I'm not doing it.
And to be fair here, that Paul sells a supplement line predicated upon eating animal products exclusive of plant-based products. So you can see that there's a financial bias to which I speak about quite often here. There is a financial bias, and maybe he just doesn't know. Maybe it's completely unintentional, or maybe it is strategic use of these words and conflation of small facts, gluten-free, right, celiac disease. We understand the percentage of the population that actually has a gluten intolerance or an allergy, even worse, let's say.
Well, conflicts of interest is grossly misunderstood. I don't mind when people have a business, like you have a DOLCE diet, like, because you could say the same thing. Well, fuck, Mike just wants to sell his thing. Paul wants to sell his thing.
My diet is based upon education, Mr. Galpin.
Well, Dr. Galpin.
Sorry, Dr. Galpin.
Wow. No, but this is, again, I don't even talk about Paul.
No, it's not about Paul, and I think he's a great guy, right? And nothing bad, but it's for everyone watching right now, the regular folks out there that are just trying to freaking live better lives. Like the A-class athletes, they have access, right? They can do what they want to do. It's all the regular folks out there trying to figure it out. Man, I can't. DOLCE, you said eat spinach. I can't eat spinach anymore.
Yeah, now so this is the difference, though.
I've got to eat steak and butter instead.
Look at how they positioned yourself. So the DOLCE diet is a company, a product designed to help you get X results. And we will use systems that fit you to get X result. That's very different than we are giving you the exact same thing every time. Yep. So when you have someone whose entire product is based on the approach rather than the outcome, then they're in deep trouble, because now they are 100% incentivized to make sure that thing works. Yep. And any deviation from that means their entire ethos is wrong. Yep. You don't have that problem, because if you come out and find out that, hey, actually, spinach is bad for you and it is toxic. Okay, the DOLCE diet still lives, but now we don't recommend spinach anymore. Yeah. That's why, because new scientific evidence. But when your diet is you eat only meat and everything else is toxic for you, and I know he did not say that clearly, but I'm giving an extreme example. Then what happens if there's any evidence at all that something is not toxic besides meat, then you're screwed because your entire ethos is only eat these things.
Yep.
And that's why we've seen these people come and go over the years, is because it may take 10 years, but eventually the experience and the evidence will catch up and be like, well, no, I'm sorry, but you're not the only one in the world who produces coffee beans that aren't toxic. Oops. Sorry. Like, you can make that claim. No one else can do it. No one else can do it. And it might take companies 5 years and studies to come out, but eventually they're going to say, ours isn't either. Yeah. And you're like, shit. And now you have to pivot to something else. And now you have to pivot to sugar is what causes brain cancer. Really? Yeah, because, and then you make up some like wild story, and then you sell a bunch of books, and then studies come out looking at science, sugar on the brain, and actually, nope, it doesn't. Yep. Shit. Now sugar does that. And it's like, you just keep moving the target, right? And this is such the problem with moving the goalpost. It's like it's the classic Carl Sagan's the dragon story, right? So the invisible dragon story, it's just like, no matter what you say, I'm just going to move the target, basically. And you go look that up. It's a great story for how science is misapplied or bullshit, more specifically, is done. But they just move the target. It's like, it does this. Okay, science can go. And the claims sound amazing because you can take this, and you can create a story behind it. But then when we test your thesis and it doesn't stand up to the rigors of science from multiple labs and multiple tests, and it's sort of like eventually you got to admit that you're just dead fucking wrong.
Bam!
And the problem is, Mike Dolce, we don't make these people pay a price for being wrong.
I try.
Yeah. There's no social. They're innovators, right? Like, well, how the fuck can you be an innovator if you're always you're first in, but you're wrong?
Yeah. Well, next time, here's what we want to. I want to come back. Love to get you guys back on, and let's start hammering some of these maybe individuals, these entities, these brands, these concepts that are wrong, and let's shine the light on them. Let's have these conversations. We can be as specific or general as possible, but we'll talk behind the scenes what we're willing to go. What names we're willing to say and what we won't say out of respect. And maybe we'll reach out to a few and go from there. But gentlemen, I have to jump off right now. I appreciate the hell out of you guys being on. We are going to end this on a high note. Thank you. Follow Dr. Andy Galpin on Instagram, at DeFranco's Gym on Instagram. You guys are freaking phenomenal. I appreciate you guys for being here. And friends, thank you guys for being along for the ride. Until next time, bye.